I would like to introduce our panelists. They will be asking questions that are based on input we have had from Chamber members. Your panelists tonight are Barry Moss, current board member of the Brockville and District Chamber of Commerce; Brock Tufts, current director of the Youth Professional Network; Trish McNamara, president of the Thousand Islands Gananoque Chamber of Commerce; and Bonnie Pigeon Kugler, president of the South Grenville Chamber of Commerce. I would like now to introduce our candidates for this evening's debate. All candidates were invited to participate, however, some were unable to attend. Present with us tonight are Steve Clark, representing the Conservative Party; David Henderson, representing the Liberal Party; Michelle Taylor, representing the NDP Party. Please welcome all of our tonight's candidates. I'd like to review the format for tonight's activities. Our panelists will be presenting questions to each candidate. The lead candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. When the candidate is finished, or when the 2-minute time limit is up, the other two candidates will each have 1 minute to give a rebuttal. At the end of both rebuttals, the original candidate will have an opportunity to state their final position within a 1-minute time frame. We will be rotating questions through the candidates in turn. Candidates pre-selected their position for questions before coming on stage this evening. I'd now like to introduce our timekeepers. Please welcome Pam Robertson, Executive Director of the Brockville and District Chamber of Commerce; Jan Murray, Member and Events Coordinator for the Brockville District Chamber of Commerce, the shy one, and Amy Kirkland, General Manager of the Thousand Islands Gananoque Chamber of Commerce. We do have ground rules for everyone. They are as follows: no heckling. 2 political signs per candidate are allowed. 1 will be hung in front of them on the candidate's table, and 1 for the literature table placed in the lobby. No additional signs will be allowed from anyone during this event. Time limits will be strictly enforced. Candidates will see a green paddle when they have 30 seconds left, a yellow paddle when they have 10 seconds left, and red is the stop sign, at which time they must finish. If any candidate exceeds their time, I will be stepping in to request them to stop, and their microphone will be turned off. You don't want that to happen. Candidates, are you ready to proceed with tonight's debate? Let's get started. Before we begin our questions, each candidate is invited to give a 3-minute opening statement. According to the draw held before this debate, I would like to invite Steve Clark to begin with his opening statement.
Thanks very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. First of all, I want to thank the Chambers for organizing this all candidates meeting again here at the beautiful Brockville Arts Centre. I want to thank my fellow candidates as well for putting their names forward, and also those candidates that aren't here tonight. It's a big thing to put your name on a ballot, and I think we all need to celebrate people's commitment to public service. Folks, we're at a crossroads in Ontario with the election just 3 weeks away. Every year I make a speech at various chambers, and normally I quote this chamber report. That this year it's the 2018 Economic Outlook. It's the Ontario Economic Report, and the numbers this year are pretty staggering. The chamber goes out to their members, they ask them a number of questions, and it's this report that I use as a provincial politician when I think of business and what they want in Ontario. This year, they found a mere 23% of Ontario's businesses have confidence in the economic policies of the government. And when businesses don't have confidence in the province, they don't make investments in their businesses in our province. Sometimes they look at other jurisdictions, maybe somewhere else in Canada, maybe somewhere across the border. So I need you to understand why businesses and why chambers of commerce lack that confidence. And I'm going to quote from this 2018 Ontario Economic Report. The reasons why the business community lacks confidence in the Ontario economy are reflected of what the Ontario Chamber has heard from industry in qualitative sessions. The number one explanation cited by 3/4 of respondents is economic policy from the government. So 75% of our business community don't have confidence in the province of Ontario's government. And that underscores what I've heard both when I meet with the Chamber and when I talk to businesses in the riding, and what I've said at Queen's Park for the last 4 years. Businesses are very concerned with high electricity costs, high business tax rates, high level of provincial debt, and too many regulations. Those are the basis of how I talk about business in the legislature, and tonight you'll hear more about things that I believe will get our economy back on track. I've been your MPP for the last 8 years. I've worked hard to represent you, and I'm asking for your support on June the 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve Clark. I would now like to invite David Henderson to give your opening statement.
Thank you, and thank you to the Chamber for putting this event on, because this is important. We have to get ideas out there in front of people and get some good discussion, good debate, and really understand what is happening and what our choices are. I'd echo Steve's thoughts on that this is an important one coming up, June 7th. Matter of fact, I think it's the most important election of my lifetime because it's pivotal. It's a fork in the road. It's a choice between two directions. One direction is invest in people, invest in infrastructure, invest in jobs, and the other choice is cut back. Pull the money back, pull the jobs back. Now, I've been mayor for 12 years, and I've spent that time lobbying on different issues and working through the Joint Services Board on social services issues across this area. And what that does is it makes you very aware of where the needs are. It makes you aware of what the underlying problems across our community is. It makes you aware of just how different our area is from places like Toronto or Ottawa. And I work on regional bodies, Eastern Ontario Mayor's Committee, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and we work on economic development ideas specifically for rural areas. Because here's the thing. Steve just talked about how bad our economy is and how bad things are and how terrible things are. But the reality is that's not true. The Ontario economy has been the best performing economy in the G7, the Western countries, for the last 3 years. We are now at a record unemployment rate, 5.5%. And if you go to companies and talk to them what happens at a 5.5% unemployment rate, they start having problems getting people. But here's the difference. When we're at that social services table and we see what's going on here, you recognize that what's going on in Toronto or Ottawa is different than rural Ontario. In Toronto or Ottawa, you might not need those programs and you might not notice those programs, but here you will. And those programs here mean a difference. They mean more hospital beds, they mean more nurses, they mean more infrastructure, they mean more business. There are at least 5 plants in the city of Brockville alone that have gotten grant funding for EODF, Eastern Ontario Development Funds, which means it's leveraged to buy equipment to be more competitive with the world and hire more people. And that's just in this urban area. Across this region, there has been agricultural programs of the same nature. There has been infrastructure commitments to cell band development, to make sure you have cell structure out there. This province is doing well. We've got to keep it going.
Thank you, David. Finally, I'd like to invite Michelle Taylor to give her opening statement.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay. We're living in interesting political times right now, not the least of which is right here in Ontario. I believe that the NDP, our policies, and our leader are the answer, and I look forward to being part of a successful election result for the NDP on June 7th. The Liberals have had a long time to make a mess of things in Ontario, and we are ready to roll up our sleeves and bring things back to prosperity. From selling off our hydro to forcing the closure of businesses through their hydro fees to threatening our local schools, they have made their mark. The PCs just want to cut and privatize where we should be investing, in our healthcare, our education, our very communities. The NDP has a better plan, one that will change Ontario for the better. We don't have to go from bad to worse. We need to look hard at the party policies, their track record, their credibility. We need to look around our communities and ask ourselves, which party will improve our lives and those of our neighbors in real and tangible ways? I'm here this evening to outline as best I can why the NDP is the best choice on June 7th, and the only choice to get Ontario headed in the right direction. I want to bring great social services and fair hydro to our riding. I want to improve the lives of those struggling to make ends meet and those wondering what the next day will bring to them. I want to be a strong advocate to Queen's Park for our schools, our hospitals, and our businesses. I'm eager to sit down with all sectors in Leeds-Grenville to learn about your concerns and to bring them to the legislature. You will not find a more devoted candidate committed to making your daily life better. I look forward to good conversation this evening and getting a real sense of where we all stand on important issues. I trust you will see that the NDP is the right choice for Ontario and for our great riding. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Let's proceed with our questions. Our first question is from Barry Moss and directed towards Steve Clark.
Steve, Bill 148 has been implemented for the past 5 months. Can you please discuss these implications for Ontario constituents and small and large businesses? Address your perception of the benefits and also the issues that remain to be addressed. If elected, what, if any, changes would you propose to the bill?
Well, thanks for the question. Obviously, Bill 148 was a huge strain on business in the riding. I heard from many businesses, and they came and presented either at the committee in Kingston, or they sent me letters, phone calls, emails. It was a big deal for the government to table the legislation, and I think that's why the Chamber, in its Vote Prosperity platform, where they've picked 18 recommendations, that's why on page 29 they talked about government and making hasty decisions, government rushing through legislation without adequate consultation for businesses. One of the things that happened just as the election was being called was the government rolled back the holiday provisions in Bill 148 because they knew that it was a bit of a disaster for them, and they couldn't go into the election with that holiday provision section coming forward. What would I change? My party's talked about not moving forward with the next increase of the minimum wage on January 1st, 2019. Instead, we'd give a minimum wage tax credit. We'd also take a page from the Vote for Prosperity platform of the Ontario Chamber and actually sit down with businesses and talk about the issues that are before them. There were a lot of angst and anxious times for businesses. What we saw in the riding, quite frankly, we saw businesses adjust hours. We saw businesses go from a 12-month business. We saw some businesses become a seasonal business. We have young people who are very concerned when they graduate from high school, whether they're going to have a job. So we don't want to repeat that. The Chamber says there's 185,000 jobs at risk because of Bill 148. We've got to do a better job consulting businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. 1-minute rebuttal. David?
Yeah, absolutely incredibly is that, a society is made up of businesses and people. And the bottom line is that somebody that was making minimum wage, that was below a living wage. And it leads to just a range of poverty issues that was unacceptable. And it made sense to move this up, and it hadn't been moved up for a number of years. And here's the truth of the fact. We're 4 months in, and Ontario has created a net new 10,000 jobs. And, oh wait, the economy's roaring, and the unemployment rate is at 5.5% across the entire province. Bottom line is, it's working. Studies elsewhere show that it's working, and it pours money back into our local economy. This money doesn't disappear. It gets bought in other products, in other services, in other small businesses in our local economy. So let's separate the hearsay and, hey, I don't like this, from the facts and the things that are actually happening out there on the floor. Because when we talk about a company adjusting their hours of work, if a company had to adjust and they didn't adjust it before, they should have.
Thank you, David. Rebuttal, Michelle?
Thank you. So, as most of you probably know, the NDP is absolutely in favor of increasing the minimum wage, and this should have been done a long, long time ago. We're going to raise it to 15, and then we're going to index it to inflation, as also should have been done a long time ago. It's irresponsible to have left a quarter of Ontarians struggling to make ends meet, making so little money over the last 2 decades while the minimum wage was largely frozen. Nobody working full-time should be living in poverty, and we need to raise our society from the bottom up. It will also have positive spillover for local businesses. People who make more can spend more. The NDP will also add students and servers to that list so that nobody in Ontario is forced to work for anything less than minimum wage. I think our entire province will be much stronger socially and economically when everyone is taking home a paycheck that realistically matches the increasing cost of living.
Thank you, Michelle. Final position, Steve?
Thousands of jobs were lost in this province in January because of Bill 148. Things might be great in Liberal Ontario and Toronto or Ottawa, but in Eastern Ontario, things aren't that great. Jobs aren't plentiful. So we need to be able to have a policy to create a climate where we can create jobs. And that's what our platform, the Ontario PC Party platform under Doug Ford, we want to put our fundamentals so that we can create jobs. We want to listen to the Ontario Chamber of Commerce with the Vote Prosperity Plan. We're not going to vilify businesses like this government did in January. We're going to work with businesses. We're going to listen to them. That's the way to do it in Ontario, not to vilify somebody because if they don't agree with Bill 148 that they're somehow against people that are in poverty or in need. That's not the Ontario that I live in, and I don't think our Premier and our government should be vilifying business. We should be open for business. We should be in a situation where we welcome business.
Thank you. Our second question is from Brock Tufts and is directed towards David.
Actually, I think it's me, Sue.
You guys should be sitting in different seats.
Dave, presently there's much legislation influencing how businesses create and implement their human resources, i.e. Bill 168, AODA, the OHSA, anti-spam legislation, and consequent inspections and training requirements. Discuss the benefits and issues with these workplace social initiatives, how they have changed Ontario workplaces and affected businesses both small and large.
Sure, but I want to start off, just want to thank Steve for acknowledging just a few minutes ago that the Toronto economy is booming, but ours isn't. Because that's the essence of our entire discussion here is the fact Toronto is booming, we're not. We need services and programs here. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. But ladies and gentlemen, on this issue, day of mourning. We just went to a ceremony about a week ago to acknowledge the loss of lives in our workplaces, and it was a day of mourning. And in that ceremony, it was very clear that when you're having a discussion about the workplace and workplace safety, is that no job is worth somebody dying. and no job is worth somebody losing a leg or anything else. And the reason that we put in these laws is because that happened at different places. So it's so important that we put in laws to make sure that that small percentage of bad employers address these issues. And it is a small percentage. I have been an employer where I've double mortgaged the house to make sure we can employ people. And I know that these can be onerous sometimes. But you know what? When my daughter grows up and goes to work, she won't like that being 21 that I said that, but when she's out there, she should not have to suffer anything in the workplace, any kind of objective, irresponsible actions towards her. And you know what? As leaders and leadership in any organization, we have a responsibility when somebody reports inappropriate behavior to investigate it, to figure out how to stop it, to hold people accountable for it, and to change the workplace or the environment of it. That's leadership's responsibility in any organization. Here it's formalized. Yes, it's difficult, but it's appropriate. Good employers don't mind it.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Michelle?
So I believe that there are strong benefits to consistent messaging in Ontario workplaces. Every worker deserves to be in a place of employment where they can expect to be treated with respect and to know what standards they are expected to meet themselves as an employee. The NDP will require regular updates of workplace safety rules, as well as WSIB rates and coverage. We're also going to expand the coverage and definitions of occupational illnesses and set up a task force to remove barriers between injured workers and the compensation they deserve. Another NDP initiative that I just want to plug here is that we are going to have presumptive PTSD coverage for frontline healthcare workers. They will no longer need to prove their condition was caused by their work. We need to be better at caring for those who care for us, and this is a great start in that direction.
Rebuttal, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with many of the things that are said. We should have a workplace where you're free of harassment and bullying. No one should fear to go to work. David mentioned the day of mourning that he and I attended with my friend, the late Gord Brown. And it was a very solemn ceremony where you talked about people who hope that there would be a day come where there would be increased safety at the workplace. So those are all things that I think we take as a given. Just as I said out in the rural, all candidates meeting in Toledo, that we should look at rural policy with a bit of a rural lens. We should look at some of the policy that deals with business with a business lens. Not saying that it should just be business, but they should have a seat at the table. They should be able to have their feelings thought. I heard at one of the committees, at the budget committee, about red tape, even in municipal government, where there's too many silos. So I think we have to have a situation where we talk to business.
Thank you. Final position, David.
Sure. Again, bring it back to the red tape. The red tape's there because somebody did something wrong. And time will prove whether you can fix that and make less red tape. In fact, the Liberal government has put in legislation to specifically address red tape for small businesses. That's in place now and happening now, and that was put in by the Wynne government. We have to be cautious when we talked about presumptive rules for different illnesses because of unintended consequences going down the road. When we have presumptive rules for compensation, they can be costly on different levels of government and different organizations. We have to be cautious, and we have to use evidence-based science when we make these types of decisions. We cannot go with gut reactions. And that's a challenge that we're seeing in this whole election, about too many gut reactions, too many angry reactions. You need evidence. You need to act appropriately with outcomes that you understand. And when it comes to this legislation in particular, the only one thing I would like to see going forward is a little bit more flexibility on the management side in being allowed to manage and being very clear on that.
Thank you, David. Okay, I think I'm back on track now. Our third question is from Brock, and it's directed towards Michelle.
Over the past number of years, childcare has become an issue of critical importance, both to support families and to grow the economy. Unfortunately, the cost and availability of high-quality childcare has become a barrier for many parents. If elected, how would you support access to affordable, high-quality childcare spaces for families in Ontario with children from ages 0 to 4?
That's a great question for an NDP candidate, because that's one of the main pillars of our policy. We absolutely agree that families need safe and affordable daycare options for their children, and we have a plan to help. We believe that childcare should be affordable for everyone. Our plan for public, licensed, not-for-profit daycare will cover children starting at newborn and have fees relative to the family's household income. So those in households making $40,000 a year or less will have their childcare fees covered completely. And then above $40,000, it'll be on a sliding scale, with most people paying on average about $12 a day. We're going to work with school boards and community centers to create new centers and daycare spaces. The benefits of funding childcare will be significant for our local economy, from allowing more parents to go back to work to creating jobs in the early childhood education field. It's a winning solution for the daycare struggle facing many parents, and the NDP is committed to start helping young families on June 7th.
Rebuttal, Steve?
Yeah, childcare is critically important, and as people in Ontario have worked harder and seem to fall farther and farther behind with some of our increased costs for hydro and for high taxes, I think having a plan that provides a childcare option, but does it in a more flexible manner that meets people's needs, is more sensible. So our plan is to provide up to 75% of the cost back to the parents, giving them the flexibility of choosing what works for them. We live in a rural riding. We don't, we do have, our urban center is Brockville, but we need to be able to have that flexibility to be able to have a parent work with what meets their time schedule and what their needs. And I think having that not like the other where they have a one-size-fits-all plan, I think having that flexibility is much easier.
Rebuttal, David?
I think it's kind of good that I'm sitting between the two extremes here, because the Liberal plan that's in place and started now says it will provide free daycare for ages 2.5 to 5. On the 75% reference that Steve just mentioned, that he didn't mention, there was a cap in there. So it's not quite the same as it sounds, but it is very clear that on one side it's don't provide the services, and on the other side it's provide it all now for everyone, and the numbers just don't add up. And there's been a $5 billion, I think it was, mistake in the accounting of the plan already pointed out. So when we're going forward, at the end of the day, we have to provide these types of services, the daycare, the extra spots, the positions for them, the qualified daycare, but we have to move into it on a planned process so that it's in the budget. We have a plan, we know how it's going to get paid, and absolutely, it's part of that $6 billion deficit, and it will go down over 6 years to zero. It's the plan. There you go.
Final position, Michelle.
So just to address what the PCs are suggesting there, 75% cost back to the parents, that doesn't help parents who can't afford it up front. So that does absolutely nothing for families where the parent who's staying at home wants to go back to work. They can't afford the childcare, so they don't go. As for the Liberals, they are only covering for kids 2.5 to 5 years of age, which is kind of an arbitrary age to pick. Again, for the NDP, we will cover it for starting at newborn. Those who need it completely subsidized at households making $40,000 a year or less will not have to pay for their childcare, and everybody else on a sliding scale, as I said, at about $12 a day per household on average.
Bonnie, could you please direct your next question to Steve?
As a region and as local communities, we have made commitments to receive and support international refugees. Some have arrived and more are coming. Please discuss what your party will be doing to support immigrants and refugee settlement. and introduce targeted education and employment programs for these individuals?
Thanks very much for the question. Obviously, our communities have really benefited by the work that the community has done to bring more refugees into our townships and our city. I think a rural community like we have provides unique job opportunities that may not be available in those cities. Certainly in my time as MPP, I've supported our immigration partnership with their advocacy to the provincial government for additional funds. I also think what we can do a better job in is some of the settlement programs. I think other provinces, especially some of the western provinces, have done a better job in some cases in pairing up people and jobs that they require in their communities. So I think we can look at some of the best practices that other provinces were able to do, sort of recalibrate ourselves. But I think it gives us a good opportunity to sit down at the table with the local immigration partnership, some of the local employers, and see if we can do a better job when we welcome new refugee families to our communities.
Rebuttal, David?
Yeah. Well, it's very clear that the local program's been successful. We had a target of 10 families. We brought 11 to 12 families in across the region. It's been hugely successful, and that's under the private sponsorship program. There are two main programs out there, the private and government-sponsored programs, and we've been lobbying for a number of years to get the federal and provincial government on board with merging those two programs and mixing them so that instead of totally private-sponsored families locally, we would get a mix of private and public funding for them and some of the matching services that go with it. What's really important there is that when we have immigrants come into the area, they often need some of the same services that we try to provide for the refugee families that are here. English as a second language, different integration programs within the communities. And if we can merge the two programs, one, we can double up the number of refugee families. We can also get more of the services in the local riding area, which then supports more immigration in our area as well. And immigration is absolutely critical to the rural areas. Thank you.
Final position, Michelle? Oh, sorry. Guess what? I'm just really off track here, aren't I?
Yeah.
Steve, sorry, final position.
No, Michelle needs to.
Oh, you're looking at me questioningly, Michelle.
No, I'm just, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Final position,
Yeah.
1 minute.
Okay.
No, Steve's final. It goes to her
Yeah.
and then back to Steve.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay.
I didn't know whether to do a song and dance, what break this up a little. So sorry, your position, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. So the NDP believes that immigrants are a valuable part of our community. They're pivotal to the economic, cultural, and social fabric of Ontario. Our priority is to ensure that new immigrants have the opportunity to succeed and to build a life here. Language and cultural barriers can make it difficult to find meaningful employment, and many employers undervalue international experience. The process for credential recognition can be long, arduous, and expensive. A new Democrat government will make sure that the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program is responsive to the labour market and will provide the best environment in the country for immigrants to settle, contribute, and prosper. We're going to partner with nonprofit organizations, settlement service providers, employers, and municipalities to create job opportunities and settlement services in rural communities to address the unique challenges these communities face in attracting and retaining immigrants.
Final position, Steve.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page, the three of us. Michelle talked about the provincial nominee program, which is the settlement program that I spoke of, that other provinces were able to use better and more efficiently to match up those jobs that were available in their communities. David mentioned the fact that we've been great in our communities in accessing the private program, and now we need to turn our attention to maybe working cooperatively at the federal and provincial level to try to get dollars that meet our needs. I remember David coming to me expressing that we needed a bit more translation services. That was something that the provincial program needed to do to help us. So I think we always have to be in mind, what do our local groups need? What do the local individuals that are coming here need? And I think we can do a better job of coordination on the ground.
Thank you.
You're-
Fifth question, Barry, to David.
Dave, the current provincial government has recently announced several funding initiatives for the downtowns across Ontario, including the Revitalization Fund, the Digital Mainstream Fund, and the Accessibility on Main Street Fund. How will your party ensure the vitality of our downtown areas?
First and foremost, keep these plans in place. And some of them don't have extensive funding, but they're critical for getting the local BIAs, the local volunteers involved, and leveraging it into more. And we're seeing that happen in our downtown. We're seeing it in other downtowns across this area. I think these are exactly the type of funds that other parties would view as potentially waste, edge funds, funds that aren't needed. But if you ask any of the rural areas or the small towns, they're critical. These are funds that are leveraged, where businesses kick in more funds, municipalities kick in more funds to make things happen. And this is the character of a lot of our small towns and hamlets. This is what it is, the downtown. We've been on a process that the province has done through their policy statements of intensification. You see this in the bigger cities, but in our areas, you see intensification rules in our planning that says you have to fill in spaces before you spread out. That's what the green belt is in Toronto. It's about stopping sprawl. And it's accepted widely because when you intensify, it means you have better usage of resources, of your infrastructure. It costs less to serve more people. It's a much better usage of taxes. And yet, we saw what was happening in the green belt in Toronto. It was almost gone, and it was almost up for sale. In our areas, it means intensification in the downtown core. It means funding and programs to make sure that we reinvest in the buildings, in heritage buildings, in brownfield sites, to clean them up so that there's funds there to make sure that we clean up a site like the Phillips Cable site or other sites around our entire area. The waterfront is littered with old industrial sites all the way from Gananoque way down to Johnstown. So these types of programs, they do cost money, but it depends on what you want for the province going forward. What do you want for our riding? What do you want for the place we live?
Michelle?
So the Ontario's Municipal Partnership Fund, which is the main source of funding for small and rural municipalities, has actually been cut by $120 million a year over the last 10 years. The NDP is going to stop and reverse those cuts and closures and invest in rural transportation, healthcare, schools, and infrastructure, all the while ensuring cohesive rural communities and a strong rural economy that all Ontarians will benefit from. We're going to increase the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund to $550 million, with regular increases in the subsequent years to ensure that smaller municipalities have access to reliable funding to provide municipal services people depend on. The NDP is committed to ensuring the vitality of downtown areas and municipal assets. We're going to unfreeze library budgets, allowing them to offer more community programs like handing out free passes to local museums and galleries. This is going to be a big step in the right direction for engaging youth in literacy and programming and promoting a lifelong love of learning.
Steve?
Yeah, those programs mentioned in the question are all very good programs. They're fairly small in dollars, and they provide flexibility for each municipality to do what they think is important. I spoke to Hillary earlier today, and in Brockville, you know, it's some beautification items, extension of Wi-Fi. You know, they're very good programs that the BIA feel are in their best interest here in Brockville. The same goes to the other communities who receive the same, you know, amount of money. It's done through AMO. We need to work through it with our municipalities and with our municipal organizations. But at the same time, those little dollars don't address what's in the Chamber of Commerce report. And that's, we've got to have a system where we're open for business, where we're able to deal with those business barriers to having that confidence. I had one business, for example, under the Bill 148, talk about how they had multiple locations. Now they had to consolidate into one location. All the little programs, you need to have that business confidence in addition to that. Thank you.
Final position, David?
Sure. You should be clear on the OMPF funding. The OMPF funding that was referred to earlier was actually a transition funding originally back in 2000 when there was the downloading of social services onto municipalities from the last PC government. It was transition funding to try and, take the brunt of the hit, and then mostly it stayed in place. In the meantime, OCIF funding and a whole range of other acronyms have increased infrastructure funding to municipalities year after year after year. It's on the table now, and we got to keep it on the table. Big thing here is, and what will really revitalize our downtowns is infrastructure funding and programs that make our local economies stronger. Infrastructure funding that leads to more competitive positions in our businesses, in our schools, in our social economy, and services that are jobs. Because at the end of the day, our downtown is vital if people are living there and they're spending money there. And to do that, you need jobs.
Thank you. Trish, you have a question for Michelle.
Michelle, if elected, what will your top priority be? Please discuss the issue that, in your opinion, needs to be addressed immediately upon taking the reins.
So my top priority as your MPP will be to advocate for those most in need in our community and those agencies who support them. Affordable housing, raising the minimum wage, and pushing for living wages across Ontario and right here in our riding are critically important. When people don't have a safe, warm place to live, when they don't have enough healthy food for themselves and for their children, nothing else matters. Nothing. Those of us who have not lived this reality need to put ourselves in their shoes as much as we can. Nobody chooses to live in poverty. Those affected are not lazy, looking for handouts. They are you, they are me. Something has happened in their lives that has knocked them off their feet. None of us are immune from that happening to us. Our society needs to stop turning away from unseen poverty and jump into the issue head first. The NDP policies are deliberately focused on those in need. We are committed to raising them up, and I can't wait to get to work.
Steve.
Yeah, I think economic development obviously is the number one thing that I think we need in our riding and in Eastern Ontario, in the province in general. Locally, we've got a lot of cooperation. We've had our municipal partners spend record amount of dollars on economic development. We've seen cooperation among municipalities for business retention and expansion through their own departments and through the United Counties. We see now a tremendous political will among the mayors and the communities in the South with the St. Lawrence Economic Corridor Commission. But again, we need to implement some of the policies that the Chamber is talking about. We need to address some of the things Brockville Chamber and other Chamber members tell me all the time. High hydro rates, high taxes, a lot of regulations. Those are the things that we need to address as a government if we want to move forward. It's all about creating that climate to create jobs.
David.
We have to move beyond rhetoric and all this gut reaction and these really good catchphrases, because at the end of the day, we have to keep going with the infrastructure investments that are on the table, with the program investments that are on the table that are affecting this riding. The corridor project that Steve just mentioned, it's funded by a Liberal program in place now. It's also funded by the municipalities, our municipality. Why do we do that? Because we also get program funding and infrastructure funding through the provincial government. They're on the table now. They're starting to get on the table. We have to keep them on the table and keep moving forward. These, we can say that poverty is the highest concern, but we solve poverty by investing money in projects that hire people. And in this area, government has a responsibility to step in when the market itself can't totally solve the problem. Here in Toronto, the market solves the problem. Here, programs and spending have to be a part of it. Good.
Final position, Michelle?
So, many of the NDP policies, they have a direct spillover effect in a positive way on the economy. Again, raising the living wage, raising the minimum wage is going to put more money back into the local economy. Getting people's hydro bills down, they have more money to spend, they spend it in the local economy. Giving people help with their social services, their dental, their pharmacare. Those are basic things, those are a basic human right. People should have them already. On June 7th with the NDP, they'll have them then. But they save money on that. They don't need to worry about that. They can spend more money, again, local business, helping the local economy.
Brock, a question directed to Steve.
Steve, what do you think is the most pressing issue facing young people starting their careers and living in your riding? And what will your party do to support them with this issue?
Yeah, again, I think on the job side, one of the things that I'm hearing more and more from young people are about skilled trades and about making sure that the government has their priorities straight. I know it's mentioned in many of the chamber reports about post-secondary education and being able to equip young people with the right jobs. Right now, we've got a number of skilled trades people who are working past their retirement. And we need to make sure that young people have those job opportunities in the skilled trades. I think it's a big job opportunity for young people, but we have to make sure that we've got the partnerships in place and we make it easy for them to move forward. And it's something that I think I've seen in chamber reports before, and it's I think a very easy recommendation for young people.
Rebuttal, David.
Sure, we've seen the investments in the apprenticeship programs that are in place. The provincial government has put in place those programs, and that's part of the key, is getting the young person their first opportunity to get experience, to take on the first role. That's why we've also seen the $1,000 grants for youth, for a company that's hiring youth. We've also seen the Ontario-Canada Partnership for Training for hiring youth, $10,000 of training through programs like the EEC. These are programs that are in place to try and get local young people their first job. That's the challenge. Get them the first job, the experience, let them figure out where they're headed. The other ones are there to get them to school and get them the right education. And again, that's based on ability, or it should be based on ability, which comes back to the whole tuition support program. If you can get into the school, you shouldn't have to depend on whether you can pay to get into school. And that's currently part of the problem.
Michelle?
So, I think the most critical issue facing our young people just starting out is their ability to go into the career that they want, the one that they're most suited for, regardless of the cost. Funding education for people with the drive to learn is one of the best investments we can make as a society. Do you want people in the right career for them, or just the richest? When our young people can choose a career based on their aptitude and personal preference instead of what they can afford, they'll contribute back to society in monumental ways throughout their working lives. The NDP is going to replace student loans with grants so that debt is not a consideration or burden to people just starting out, and it's absolutely the right way to go in supporting our young people as they're starting out in their adult lives.
Final position, Steve.
Yeah, I think you look at page 18 of the Chamber's report. It talks about working with industry partners, post-secondary institutions, and employers on the skilled trade side. And I really believe that because those jobs in some cases are going unfilled because there's no young person in that, I think we need to make a special effort to work with employers, to work with colleges and universities. We have to make sure, and there's another question that's similar to it later, we have to make sure that we've got jobs that make sense for those communities. And again, I've heard over and over again that people in the skilled trades are getting older. They need to have that partnership with new apprentices moving forward.
Thank you. Bonnie, please direct your question towards David.
David, many Ontarians rely on non-for-profits and charitable organizations for important services in our communities. But to sustain these essential services, these organizations need public funds. Infrastructure funding is vital to expand and improve the opportunities for citizens to access the programs and services that they need. Please present your plan for addressing the gap in infrastructure funding and providing support for social support centers.
Well, we've seen over the past 3 to 4 years the discussion, the development of the hub process. The hub groups, we've seen it on a non-structural basis with the police services and social services getting together, and now we're seeing it on a structural basis where the province is encouraging the use of extra buildings or buildings that aren't used anymore, old schools or psychiatric hospital as an example, sites, properties, to try and use them for hubs where community service groups, agencies, nonprofits can get together and provide services together, partnering, sharing resources. Probably the best example of it we have here is the Bartholomew Hub in Brockville, where the Brockville Police Services have partnered with local businesses, they've partnered with local church groups, local agencies, and it's turning into a hugely successful social program of getting kids meeting the police officers, getting comfortable with them, getting them involved in programs, actually leading into school programs. So this is an excellent example of where the government can encourage, can facilitate, and lead agencies together to get productive results.
Michelle?
So in talking about community service hubs, that's one of the things that the NDP is proposing to do with their daycare plan. Our priority in doing daycares is going to be to try and have them in public schools, existing infrastructure as much as possible, which makes those more which makes them better used, and also is convenient for parents dropping off their kids at the daycare and at the school at the same time. We're also wanting to invest in other commitments like mental health and addictions. Specifically there, we're going to look at building 30,000 new supportive housing units because we know that those are needed. And we're also going to be looking very closely at children's mental health and bringing their wait time for care to 30 days maximum. There are 12,000 kids waiting for care right now, and that absolutely needs to be addressed.
Steve?
Yeah, I've led the charge in terms of nonprofits with the Ontario Trillium Foundation to not regionalize and to keep the capital grants program. We were successful in ensuring that the capital grants program remained, and I think it's a huge leg up for not-for-profits and other charitable organizations. Did the same thing. I've advocated on behalf of libraries, especially in rural communities. They're the community hubs in small villages and small communities right across this province, especially in Leeds-Grenville. I think the government's infrastructure programs need to be a little more tailored to small and rural Ontario. You know, we've got an issue in Kemptville with County Road 43. It's a connecting link with 416. It's been the #1 project by the county. Hasn't got to funding in 5 years. So I really think that, plus all along Eastern Ontario, the Eastern Ontario Wardens have talked about a broadband project that would help cell and broadband service. I think that's one infrastructure project that all three parties need to buy into. Thank you.
Final position, David?
Yeah, I'm just surprised about the buying into all three parties into the broadband, because the Liberal Party has put forward $71 million into that cell gap process already and to emergency services for it. I think we have to recognize that this discussion, a lot of this discussion, is about, are we going to put more funding on the table, or are we not? Are we going to pull it off the table? So we can talk about infrastructure programs, and we can talk about cell gap, and we can talk about schools, and we can talk about hospitals that are in play and getting funded right now, or we can talk about when that funding gets pulled back, and there will not be those programs in play, and we will not be building those projects. We're talking about mental health, we're talking about nurses. Again, fundamentally, they're in the budget now. There's a deficit to cover it. There's a 6-year plan to cut that deficit back to zero. Either you think that those are needs in this community that need to be funded, or you don't. You either fund those programs or you stop the programs and the jobs.
Thank you. Number 9, Barry, please direct towards Michelle.
Michelle, recently, Ontario's Auditor General delivered a report asserting that the current government statements of the province's finances hugely understate its deficit. Especially, please discuss recent revelations of the Finance Hydro debt expenditures with off-the-balance sheet adjustments. Give your perspective on the situation and describe how your party will work towards ending such a seemingly spurious accounting in the future.
Thank you. So that's a pretty timely question, as the Liberal government has recently come out with some accounting advice for the NDP on our policy plan. The very premise of this is pretty surprising to us, to say the least, as we're the only party with a fully costed plan, and the Liberals are the very last party who should be offering any suggestions on mathematical mistakes. Granted, they are the experts, but they might focus their attention on their own books, because they could certainly use a review for accuracy and transparency. When they sold off Hydro One, they did not allow any official review of the sale or the conditions. The NDP is not into backroom deals. We're not into below-board transactions. We welcome audit and review of all of our numbers and plans now and after we form government. We have a long list of bad Liberal contracts to clean up, but we're up for the task. Change for the better is coming to Ontario's books.
Steve?
Well, the Auditor General, the Financial Accountability Officer, they've tabled many reports that are scathing indictments of this Liberal government and their accounting procedures. Barry, you used the words off the balance sheet. You know, you listen to Kathleen Wynne and some of our candidates, they talk about it as a disagreement. It's fundamental, and why so many programs are being crowded out in terms of funding. When you spend your third largest spending item in your budget is interest on the debt, you crowd out the opportunities to spend more money on healthcare. You crowd out the opportunity to spend more on infrastructure. And to say it's an accounting dispute is disingenuous to the independent, nonpartisan officers. Doug Ford, when he was in Brockville, said he was going to have a line-by-line review of Kathleen Wynne's books. I agree with that 100%. We've got to get down to what they're spending the money on, and that's the only way to do it.
David?
All right. So that's pretty incredible. Considering a few things. So the Financial Accountability Officer actually disagrees with the Auditor General when it comes to how to account for pension assets, which was a reverse decision only 2 years ago that was introduced when the Conservatives were in power in 2012. And wait, on the fair accountability for the Fair Hydro Plan, it's in the Chamber of Commerce's book as a win on lobbying for the Chamber of Commerce because it reduced hydro rates by 25% across the province. But this gets even better because 2 months ago, the PC plan said that this accounting was all right. 2 months ago, it was all right. Now it's not. But better yet, on their current hydro plan to reduce it 12% more, they use the same accounting and it's still in there. So it's so disastrous and it's so wrong, but they're going to keep it. And at the same time, when you say it's disingenuous for a dispute, it's 3 of the major 4 accounting firms that say it's right.
Michelle?
But you want to keep it.
Final position?
So again, you know what? If you like good math and if you like good accounting, you should absolutely be looking at NDP policy, NDP books. We've got it all costed out from hydro to social services. Take a look. You're going to like what you see.
Trish, if you could please direct question number 10 to Steve.
It has become increasingly clear over many past months that hydro and hydro rates have been top-of-mind concerns for our residents and businesses. The Liberals have put in place the Fair Hydro rate plan to reduce rates. Give your own analysis of this program and describe what your party will do to ensure that hydro rates are minimized for both households and businesses.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the Chamber for their advocacy on this file. They had a meeting with both individuals and businesses about hydro, so I want to thank the local chambers for doing that. The Liberals' unfair hydro plan has been just a disaster. I think they've, it's funny that Kathleen Wynne now says the person that's put our hydro system in this mess now is the only person that can fix it. It's a ridiculous statement. We've looked at the best way to handle it, and I think most folks decide they want relief. Businesses want relief, so that hydro dividend, we're going to give it back to people. We're not going to put it into general revenue. We're going to rebate it back. We're going to take those conservation programs and we're going to move them so that it saves businesses and individuals money. We're going to place a moratorium on those new energy contracts, and that's the only way. You know, the $6 million man and that crazy board today with that $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 bonus is ridiculous. And it may not affect rates, but I'll tell you something, we got to stop that culture of entitlement with the CEO and the board of Hydro One. So it might not affect rates, but it needs to stop, and people are furious about it. They want relief, and our plan is going to provide some relief. Thank you.
David?
So that's something because, you know, you had $9 billion when they sold off hydro, and it went not into operating, it went into capital infrastructure. And here's Steve Clark on a mail-out paid by the government, and it says, hey, capital infrastructure, wastewater project for Westport. This is where the money went. It goes into infrastructure across the region that our MPP then claims. Look, he claims that this was his working because he likes the program. He didn't like the program when you have to approve the spending, but he likes the program when you get the snapshot. Guys, you can't have it both ways. At the end of the day, hydro is a nuclear-powered process that costs a lot of money that we've got to pay. And yet the Fair Hydro Plan, which the Chamber of Commerce said that this was a good win for them in lobbying, reduced our rates by 25%. And if you want to reduce those rates by 12% more, where's the money coming from? Because you're keeping in the plan they didn't like, and they're switching more money over onto the tax base.
Michelle?
Somebody's got to add it up.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, now for the sake of making peace here, I'm just going to tell you they're both wrong. So honestly, the Liberals coming up with any strategy to fix the hydro problems is a little rich. They forced Ontario into selling off our public utility, which they had no right to do. They were not looking out for you and me when they made these decisions, and they're certainly not doing it now. The NDP is the only party who will bring Hydro One back into public hands and reduce our bills by 30%. Higher delivery fees punishing rural residents, gone. Time of use billing that squeezes businesses, stay-at-home parents, and seniors, gone. Plus, Ontario will soon be reaping the rewards of having our utility back in public hands with all the financial dividends that come with it. We understand the hydro burdens the Liberals have created, and we have the best plan for relief.
Final position, Steve?
We're going to clean up the hydro mess. We're going to put more money in your pocket. The Liberal candidate in the 2014 election, all the all-candidates meetings we had, never mentioned one time that they were going to sell off the crown jewel asset of the Ontario government, which is Hydro One. Over 200 municipalities, most Chamber of Commerces, many business talked about how detrimental that was for our future. I am not going to be lectured by anybody else to try to think that our hydro system is in good stead. It is not. We need relief, and we need to stop that out-of-control board, period.
Brock, question for David.
David, what methods will you advocate for, if any, to alleviate the heavy burden of first-time home ownership for those seeking to make a first home purchase?
First of all, you got to be very cautious about alleviating that burden for first-time homeowners, because as you should be very aware from the Chamber of Commerce perspective is that the most imminent danger was a bubble in the Toronto market. So plans have been put in place to actually try to slow down that, try to prevent any kind of collapse, because recessions are caused by collapses. And it was starting to heat up. The prices were going through the roof. So between the federal and provincial government, and pretty well endorsed by most bodies, they've tried to slow that down. The challenge is regionally. And again, it comes back to the whole issue of us versus the large urban centers. So the goal should be to try and find regionalization of those financial rules that were put in place to try and slow down that bubble in Toronto. Because in our area, by the time we start heating up, a place like Toronto is starting to cool down or going through a collapse. That's traditionally the pattern they go through. So for us, we need a regional approach to the financial rules to make sure that the controls that are put in place right now that make it more or harder for people to have their first house or to get a mortgage are not the same as here as in Toronto. That's the key thing.
Michelle?
So one of the ways that the NDP is going to help new homeowners getting into the housing market is we're going to crack down on housing speculators who are driving up housing costs. We're going to apply a non-resident speculation tax anywhere speculation is overheating the housing market. This tax is going to put a surtax on foreign and domestic speculators who don't pay taxes in Ontario. Non-Ontario residents who own homes in regions where Ontario's NRST currently applies will see a new annual tax of $5 per $1,000 of assessed value, rising to $20 per $1,000 of assessed value in 2019, and this will be matching BC's schedule. We're also going to reinvest these funds into worthwhile programs like affordable housing. The NDP will also protect home buyers from shoddy construction and unfair financial risk by reforming the Tarion Warranty Corporation, and we're going to ensure that the new home warranty system and regulator answers to home buyers and the public.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I think I met with the young professionals, Brock, and one of the issues that came up when I met with them was the issue of tiny homes. And it's come up a couple of times at our meetings, and I think if a local municipality sees that as an opportunity for first-time home buyers, that the government should work with municipalities on making sure that we can put zoning in place to be able to accommodate tiny homes. Quite frankly, it's not just for first-time home buyers. Lots of seniors are looking at tiny homes as an option. As well, I think we need to look at supply. You know, you look at the Wall Street Village project downtown for seniors. I think we need to look at available lands. You know, the Brockville Psych lands is a huge tract of land that I think provides lots of opportunity for us to do something innovative and to allow that supply to be able to help first-time home buyers. So I think there's lots of great ideas out there. We just got to give the municipalities tools to be able to put them into place.
Final rebuttal. David?
Yeah, I think that there are other elements of the total financial package and economic package that would help first-time homeowners in a different way, and that's by helping what they can afford. One, if you lessen their student loans through tuition support, it means that you don't have the student debt coming out and you have the ability to look into a first home earlier and not have to pay off that student loan debt. If you can ensure that your area has the services and the economic investments, that the jobs that there's growth in your local market, then you have a greater ability to buy that first-time home. Even to the extent of, and it's tough, but it's part of it, when you're talking about minimum wage, we do have houses in this area that are relatively affordable, and we have a fairly high content of affordable homes. We need more, but we have a pretty good ratio in this area. Going to minimum wage helps that, because that's the whole principle of a livable wage. Right now, when it's as low as it was, it's impossible.
Thank you. Bonnie, you have a question?
Yeah. Sure. Oh, gosh.
Okay, are you ready for me to ask it again? Is that okay?
Yeah. Good.
With you, Sue?
Thank you.
Okay.
Number 12.
Without a post-secondary education, disadvantaged youth have a huge handicap and are unable to contribute to the health and the growth of our increasing diverse local economy. If elected, what will you and your party be doing to support equality in post-secondary education for social economic disadvantaged students?
Thank you. So plain and simple, changing student loans into grants will be the great equalizer for post-secondary education in Ontario. The NDP plan will allow any student from any socioeconomic background to launch the career that they choose. University, college, whatever program they feel is best suited to their individual interests and aptitude will be an option for them. This option alone will be life-changing for so many people, and our society will be so much richer for it. You shouldn't need to be independently wealthy or burdened with debt to follow your career dreams. This is huge. This is going to give people ownership over their lives and the direction that they want it to follow. Think of how this will give them pride, motivation, and opportunity. This will be directly reflected back on all of us, and we will all benefit from it.
Steve?
I know better than most some of the costs of post-secondary education. As most of you know, at one point with my blended family of 5, that we had all 5 kids in post-secondary education. And I've met many times in my constituency office with people that have income challenges, and the challenges that they've had in getting their son or daughter into post-secondary education. It's good that none of the parties have talked about tinkering with any of the existing programs. I think that's a very positive step. I also think we again have to look at our community and try to provide those job opportunities for young people when it's finished. You know, I met Michael Adamcrick's here, and I met with the Colleges Ontario back in March. And it's very important that colleges are flexible to try to provide those jobs for those graduates. So I think it's good that the programs are all being talked about positively, but again, climate for jobs is important for those grads.
David?
I think this dovetails perfectly into the tuition support program. Right now, it's free tuition in Ontario for households that have an under $50,000 income. The platform is to move that to $95,000 for the household income. That's important because then it's based on ability that you get into school. And why it's important is that if we need to open up the doors for people to achieve what they can achieve, that helps our economy down the road. And there's other areas when you're talking about the disadvantage to get into school. If we can invest earlier on in them, in daycare programs, in support programs for mental health at school, in healthcare programs, in pharmacare programs, if they have the advantage of access to those programs as they're growing up, research shows us that they have a better chance of achieving more in life down the road. If they do that, that's more productive for all of us, for society, for our economy, and it means an investment early on.
Thank you. Final position, Michelle?
Thank you. So, you know, investing in education and investing in young kids is never the wrong answer. It's going to motivate them to actually go into the career that they want. They're going to have plenty of choice. I can say that it would certainly be helpful for my family, and I know it's certainly not just mine. People need options. They need career dreams. They need to be able to follow them, and we need the best people in the best jobs, regardless of the affordability of the tuition. It needs to be open to everybody, and that's going to download positively into our economy as well.
Thank you. Number 13, Barry, please direct towards Steve.
Steve, tourism forms a large part of economic development revenue for our region. What will you and your party do to foster and sustain tourism in our area?
Well, that's a great question, and one of the things that my friend, the late Gord Brown, always talked to me about was the importance of tourism as a tourism operator. And he always promoted the fact with every leader that I've ever had in my 8 years that we need tourism investment in Eastern Ontario. When the Regional Tourism Organization first started, they started marketing us as the Great Waterway. And it wasn't really, I think that at the time, it wasn't really a workable solution. Since then, the RTO has sort of redeployed and worked with local tourism groups. In Gananoque, the Thousand Islands Accommodation Partners is the example. But suffice it to say, people like Bonnie Ruddock at the RTO work on projects where there can be some stack funding, where they can support some existing initiatives for tourism. And I like that system a lot better than marketing us as the Great Waterway, which really nobody understood. So I think organizations like that and existing tourism organizations know what our priorities are, they know where funds need to be, and they're the ones that are on the ground. So, you know, I take all my advice from those tourism operators and those local organizations that are working with the RTO. We've got a lot of really cool things happening. We just need to keep supporting them.
Thank you. David?
Yeah. You have to say that as the local economies across this region have moved away from manufacturing, we've all tried to invest more in tourism to diversify the local economies and take advantage of the natural strengths that we have. And that's a key part of it, is the natural strengths, the water, the environment, the trees, to try and make sure that those areas are protected, to try and make sure our environment, that we take it into consideration, to try and make sure that we have investments to develop product. We've seen that over the last 4 years, where the government has been investing in more product development in this region, leveraging local partner funding municipally, actual private businesses. We've been developing natural products for tourism, like the tree climbing, the parks. We've had investments in the city. So you'd have to say that the government has recognized that this is an important part of diversifying our local economy across this region, and it's happening. We've got to continue working with it.
Thank you. Michelle?
So decades of Liberal and Conservative governments, both in our schools and communities, have stopped young people from playing sports, learning music, or accessing great cultural institutions, which are all part of tourism. Doug Ford believes we should cut even deeper, putting arts programs and supports in jeopardy. We love Ontario, and our arts and culture are an important part of the province that we love. The NDP realizes that small businesses are the backbone of the Ontario economy. Unlike the Liberals, who have done nothing for the past 15 years, and the Conservatives, who plan to cut corporate taxes, will only help large corporations like Doug Ford's. We plan on working together with small businesses to create good jobs and support local communities, including tourism. An NDP government will offer help to rural small businesses and will help them attract investment. We'll create a 10-year, $1 billion fund to bring broadband service to rural and northern Ontario. We'll invest $100 million in natural gas expansion to rural Ontario to reduce dependence on high-carbon diesel and heating oil.
Thank you. Michelle? Final position, Steve?
Yeah, listen, everybody knows this. We live in one of the most beautiful areas in the province, and we need the provincial government to recognize when they're going to promote Ontario, they need to promote all corners of Ontario. We need to see our advantage advertised in government brochures, in government television ads or online ads. We need that support for the programs that are being initiated here. I mentioned the RTO. The other thing I think we need to again work on is to again enhance programs like Celebrate Ontario that help those small festivals, that help incubate them to get people here, both in Eastern Ontario and across the river. I think we have a great untapped resource. We need to go back and start going right into the U.S. market and bring tourists here. We just need a government that's willing to help us with that partnership.
Thank you. Trish, number 14, directed to David.
Thank you. Tax rates are a significant consideration for businesses as they decide where to operate or where to invest. What do you and your party plan on doing to support sustainable business in our region?
I just want to touch on something that Steve just said first, is that He said it's too bad the government doesn't promote the programs that are offered here in the literature that they produce, because this, again, is the literature that was paid for by our taxes distributed across this riding, and it doesn't say anything about any programs that the government offers. Not a single one. That's it. So, taxes. Our corporate taxes in Ontario, big business taxes, are amongst the most competitive in North America. And yet, Doug Ford wants to reduce those. The Liberal government is actually reducing the small business tax. This is for $0 to $500,000 in profit. You're considered a small business if you make $500,000 in profit. We're reducing that tax by 1%, because that is a huge number of local businesses that employ people, sponsor the Arts Centre, kick into every charity we have. It's your neighbor, it's the people around you, it's the entrepreneur. That's where we're investing, trying to make sure they're competitive. On the local business taxes, that's how I got into politics, by developing arguments for the Chamber of Commerce on industrial taxes and putting plans forward that were adopted to reduce them. That's why I know that locally the industrial taxes are the most competitive in the province. And water, wastewater, in our riding, they're competitive. There are places in this riding where they're some of the lowest in the country. So when we talk about taxes, let's understand how they compare to other places, how they compare and how they attract. We deal with an HST and a GST in Canada and Ontario. For businesses, that's a good tax. It's a long way to try and describe it. But when we talk about taxes, wow. And you know, at the end of the day.
Thank you. Michelle?
At the end of the day.
So the NDP plans to encourage business in Ontario by making sure small businesses have a fair opportunity to succeed, while asking large companies to pay their fair share towards the social benefits, or the social benefits we will all benefit from. We're going to end corporate income tax giveaways and return tax rates on profits from 11.5% to 13% gradually over 4 years. We're also going to close a loophole that allows big corporations to qualify for small business exemptions. We're going to maintain the 1/3 reduction to small business corporate income tax rates. Ontario businesses will also benefit in a big way from our hydro overhaul. Lower bills and cancellation of time of use alone are going to be huge. They're also going to see a minimum of $800 million in savings just from the reduction in pharmacare costs alone. Businesses will also see a boost as minimum wages rise and people have higher spending potential.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm excited about our Open for Business plan. We've listened to the Chamber of Commerce. We want an Ontario where people can start and invest and grow their businesses. I talked about some of our hydro remedial changes that will put more money in business pocket in terms of hydro. We're going to cut corporate income taxes to from 11.5% to 10.5%. We're going to create a service standard to try to cut some of the regulations. Ontario leads the way in regulations across our country, and we've got to be competitive with some of those jurisdictions in the U.S. So I like that. I like the fact that we'd empower the Treasury Board to look at those regulations to make sure that they're helping business, but that service guarantee, that one window to help businesses go through the system, I think that's key. So we've got a very generous package that I think will get Ontario working again. And I'm just sorry that he didn't do the announcement here with the Open for Business sign at our borders.
Thank you. Final position, David?
We're going to get Ontario working again, even though the stats say that it is working, except in our rural areas. So you might just as well say, let's make Ontario great again. Let's face it, you know, we're talking about programs in areas, and we're talking about different party leaders here. Some of them are talking programs off the back of a napkin that are focused on Toronto and haven't got a clue where we are, except for driving through on the bus. You know, we're talking about a tax regime right now that is competitive here. And at the end of the day, the only other tax we haven't talked of, because it's not a tax, cap and trade. And you know why we do that? because we believe that global warming is a problem that we can affect. And we do believe that because the science is there. And cap and trade is a trade system that encourages businesses to make their systems more competitive to save money and trade off credits. It's a good system and it works, but what people don't know is when I was at the trade show at the Memorial Center last week, almost every booth there had a subsidy from that program directly to that small business to encourage you.
Thank you, David. Brock, question for Michelle.
Michelle, the youth unemployment rate in Ontario is significantly higher than that of the general population. We know that youth who gain work experience and receive on-the-job training are likelier to find suitable and sustainable employment. What are your plans to help Ontario's young people obtain work and experience?
Thank you. So as mentioned before, the NDP is going to replace student loans with grants, and that's going to go a long way to getting our young people into meaningful careers. They're going to be free to consider all the factors before choosing their course of study, including employment statistics in their field. We're also going to be championing new paid co-op and apprenticeship programs to help students get on-the-job experience before graduation. We're going to create 27,000 new placements for young people to help them hone their newly acquired skills, make good business contacts, and get their foot in the door with potential employers. We're also going to build on the federal Student Work Integrated Learning Program, expanding it beyond science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to include other fields. Through the Jobs and Prosperity Fund, we're also going to double Ontario's Career Kickstart program so Ontario's colleges and universities can create new work-integrated learning opportunities.
Thank you, Steve.
I mentioned earlier about skill trades. So, again, I think on-the-job training through apprenticeship is a big plus that I think we need to do in Ontario. I'm going to also go back to this presentation that Michael Adam Crick gave me with Colleges Ontario because of my connection with representing St. Lawrence College campus. Colleges need the autonomy and flexibility to be able to work with local industry to be able to match those jobs. And I think the government needs to work with groups like Colleges Ontario and the Council of Universities to make sure we're all working together to try to do the right thing for young people. And I happen to think the on-the-job component is probably one of the most important we can put forward as a government. So skill trades, I'm big on that. I think we need to do more. I think we need to do a better job. But I think we also have to work with our colleges and our universities. Thank you.
David?
Sure, there's a range of products and areas there that we've got to be looking at. And first, it starts with the graduation rates from our high school, and the province has been doing much better at that as putting money investments in the school programs to make sure that we have higher graduation rates from the high school, and that's been successful. The next stage is get them into college and university as much as we can into the appropriate programs, because the bottom line now is that any of the factories, and we always talk about factories, but the golden days of walking out of high school with a high school diploma and getting a job in a factory aren't happening. You need a degree or diploma. You need to go to school. That is everywhere now. Once we get out, then it's about apprenticeship programs that we have in place, about encouraging them, making sure the information is out there to everybody in our area, and encouraging businesses to pick them up. And that's when it comes to financial incentives to the businesses. Financial incentives to the business to say, look, we'll help you train the Canada-Ontario program.
Thank you. Michelle, final position.
Thank you. So again, I want to reiterate the 27,000 new placements, paid co-op and apprenticeship programs, which I think are really going to be hugely helpful. When people don't have to worry about a burden of debt when choosing their program or when choosing to go back to school or when choosing to retrain, just a wealth of opportunity and choice opens up to them, and that's really what the NDP is wanting to do, and that's what we will do for young people on June 7th.
Thank you. Bonnie, please direct your question to Steve.
What is your party's position on levying a carbon tax and on the potential use of the resulting tax revenue? If you will if you will not support the tax, what alternatives will you promote in mitigating the environmental consequences of a hydrocarbon energy use?
Yeah, my party and I don't support a carbon tax. We don't believe the solution to every problem is a tax. I think even if you listen to carbon tax proponents, they're going to tell you that to make any meaningful impact on emissions, you have to set the price so high, it's going to stagnate the economy. It's going to cause a lot of problems. The economy will grind to a halt. You know, do I agree with, do I think something needs to be done with the environment? You know, I've got 3 grandchildren now, and I want our communities to be clean and so they live in a great place to raise their kids someday. But I don't think that every solution has to be a tax. I think we can work with business, as is in this report from the Chamber, to look at reducing our GHG emissions, but to look at a more technological lens to try to do that, as opposed to just strictly through taxation.
Thank you, David.
Wow, because 2 months ago, Patrick Brown was the leader and you were the deputy leader, and your plan categorically said that a carbon tax, which would have cost $700 million more to our economy than a cap and trade, was the solution. 2 months ago, that was the solution. And today, it's not the solution. And today, we're not sure what the solution is because there is no plan for a solution. And it's interesting because what might be the solution is technical innovation. And yet the only thing that would actually incent a company to do technical innovation is something like a carbon tax that gives them a financial benefit for technical innovation and gives them a financial cost if they don't. And that's why it has worked in the past. Let's face it, on global warming, Canada's been a leader in environmental issues before. We solved acid rain. We worked on the ozone hole. We've done these things.
Thank you. Michelle?
So the NDP absolutely believes that polluters should pay for the emissions that they create. We're going to continue the carbon tax, and we're going to use the revenues to directly give back to our communities, particularly rural communities. We're also going to set clear and attainable greenhouse gas reduction targets that will be met. Another great initiative that we're looking forward to starting is supporting investments to turn farm waste into biogas. We could connect this renewable energy to the natural gas grid, reducing energy costs and carbon emissions. We're also going to work closely with our agricultural partners like the OFA to realize their vision for Ontario, which matches the NDP policy pretty darn closely. Schools, hydro, gas lines, broadband, that's all in our NDP policy.
Thank you. Steve, final position?
One of the great shames of this government was the way they implemented the Green Energy Act, which ended up demonizing wind and solar. The Auditor General acknowledged that they didn't listen to experts, that they didn't talk about new technologies. They just ended up rewarding their Liberal insider friends. I again think that we have to turn to technology to try to deal with this. I agree that we have to do something to make sure that our environment is kept for our children and our grandchildren. But just to place a tax is not the solution to every problem.
Our final question tonight, very pleased direct to David.
David, many individuals in our community struggle with transportation due to aged or economic situations. Some also suffer from reduced mobility that exacerbates this issue. Presently, many of these constituents have difficulties accessing jobs, social services, quality health care, and medical specialist centers. How would your party and you personally ensure that we meet the day-to-day social and health care transportation needs of this segment of the population?
This is very dependent on where you live, and in our riding, but across the province. But what many people might not realize is that in the city of Brockville, for example, the reason that we have a transit system is a provincial gas tax. The provincial gas tax is specifically to provide transit and related type services. That's why we have a paratransit system in the city as well, because the legislation says that if you have a transit system, you must have a paratransit system. These systems do not sustain themselves. They cost the city, in conjunction, probably $400,000 a year. But it's a grant that enables it, that makes it a decision worth making from the provincial government. That's what they allocate. So when we talk about the badness of taxes, well, remember, taxes do a lot of good things, generally things that wouldn't be done by the private sector. Without that tax, we would not have that system in the city. And there are a lot of people that move into the city because of that, when you get older or when you don't have the means to get around by yourself. Across the region, we have actually pilot-cased or done a pilot run of a transit system across the county through the Joint Services Committee. And unfortunately, in our area, the dynamics were not workable. We ran a pilot study and we pulled back from it because the circumstances weren't perfect. It needs a greater subsidy to make it actually viable. And although we may look at trying to keep people in the rural areas, until there's more on the table, that's not possibly going to work. But then again, you know, we're demonizing taxes. I'm sure there's going to be some other suggestions about putting some more tax dollars to it. It might be the appropriate answer. That's what we've all got to realize here. When we start talking taxation, taxation is a tool that steers direction of our actions and benefits.
Thank you. Michelle?
So people absolutely need to have access to the health care that they require wherever they live. The NDP is committed to making sure that that's a priority, especially in rural and northern areas. As part of increasing services like pharmacare and dental care, we're going to introduce new mobile care buses and also create new community care centers. People will no longer need to worry about how to pay for their basic needs and how to access them. And this is something that only the NDP is going to deliver to everyone. We understand that these basic services are a human right. For far too long, we have had people choosing whether to pay for rent, medication, dental, or food. They're not going to have to live like that anymore. Dignity and health will be restored to our essential care systems. We're also going to shorten surgical wait times. We're going to fund hospitals. We're going to shorten wait times for testing in hospitals, which is going to result in better health outcomes and also save money in the long run.
Thank you. Steve?
I talked to a Gananoque Chamber of Commerce member who was trying to hire people, but some of the people that wanted those jobs had transportation barriers and they couldn't accept them. In our riding, transportation's a top priority for me. It came up last night at the poverty discussion, came up last week again at the rural all candidates meetings. Every kid in our community has had some great suggestions. They actually went to a seminar that the Ministry of Transport put on. I think I was the only NPP that attended with every kid in our community. There were lots of great models, both public, private, not-for-profit, that were tabled. I think we just need to get a government that recognizes that inter-community transit is important. Brockville has a transit system. We don't have a Leeds-Grenville transit system. The GO train ain't coming to Leeds-Grenville. So we need to do our own solutions, and there's lots of suggestions out there, public, private, and not-for-profit.
Thank you. Final position, David?
Yeah, when Steve suggests that there's the government's got to come up with a solution, but then says that it shouldn't provide tax dollars to it, again, we get disingenuous here. We want a solution, but we don't want to pay the cost. You can't promise things, you can't suggest things, you can't do it without recognizing there's a cost to everything we do. You know, in this case, this is an odd one because we've already pilot tested it across this area. We made a rational decision on whether it was the highest priority for the municipal governments across this system or not, and it wasn't. You know, that's what government is making tough decisions. It means balancing needs. And that's why when we talk about, the extremes to the table here, we can't cut things, but we can't promise everything either. We have to address this buildup of needs that's on the table, and we have to do it in a planned approach. It means put money on the table in which years, make sure that it's there and how you're going to pay for it, which we did. There you go.
Thank you. The candidates will now close in the same order in which they opened. Steve Clark, would you please give your 2-minute closing statement?
Thanks very much. I want to thank the chamber, the chambers. I want to thank our questioners and the other candidates, and I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I believe we're on the cusp of something really good in Leeds Grenville. I think we've got, for once, an unprecedented level of cooperation between community chambers, local municipalities on economic development and creating jobs. If you read this report, or read the economic report, there's one thing lacking: the province. We need to have a province and a provincial government that recognizes that we need to do something about our high hydro rates, do something about our high taxes, lots of regulations, and we need to get our economic fundamentals right. We can't run 2 sets of books like the Auditor General has had, and we've got to get our hydro bureaucracy reined in and focused on reducing those rates and cleaning up that mess. I think we've got a lot of things going for us in Eastern Ontario and in Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. I've tried to be a strong advocate. I've stood up in the House and advocated for a lot of programs. I've done it positively. I've had to be more forceful when I needed to, and I've gotten results. I just think from a business perspective, we need to work with businesses, not demonize them. And I think we need to take a page from the Chamber playbook. We need to be open for business. We need to create job opportunities for our young people. We need to work together. My name is Steve Clark. I'm the Ontario PC candidate in Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes, and I'm asking you for your vote in a very positive way on June 7th. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. David Henderson, would you please give your 2-minute closing statement?
Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about rhetoric. This has got to be about facts, and it's got to be about what the plan is going forward. You can't say that we're not open for business when in this riding alone we get funding for Canarm, Trillium, Northern Cables, Burnbrae, money that goes into equipment, that goes into jobs. You can't say we're not open for business when the corridor project gets funding through the provincial government. You can't say that we're not open for business when tourism products across our region get funding. You can't say these things and then turn around and have the facts say something different. At the end of the day, I was asked online the other day about who am I running against? Am I running against Steve Clark, and am I running against Michelle, or am I running against Doug Ford? Well, I've met Kathleen Wynne, and sometimes you might disagree with her, but she believes in where this province should be. She believes that the richest province in the country should have programs that protect everybody. And at the same time, we have to do it by picking up the areas outside of Toronto and Ottawa that need programs and jobs, and that's our area. And at the end of the day, I am running against my candidates here, and I'm running against Steve Clark because I think that the candidate locally has to dig in and do more. And I think the candidate has to stand up more. And I think that given my background of standing up against the powers that be, whether it be a costing or a financing program, are proven. I'll crunch the numbers and find out what's going on. But the bigger challenge that we face is standing up against Doug Ford. He doesn't have the integrity, I don't believe. He shouldn't be the premier.
Thank you. Michelle Taylor, would you please give us your 2-minute closing statement?
Thank you. We have a big decision to make as a province on June 7th, and we must make an informed decision. Which party leader do you trust to work for you and improve your daily life? Which party has the policies that resonate with you the most and will have direct, positive effects on your community? The Liberals' time is up. Whatever promises they're making now are too little, too late. They're trying to cling to power by attempting to borrow from the NDP policy book, but we see through that. If they really were sincere, those policies would have been rolled out long ago. The PCs are headed by a leader with a history of saying what he believes people want to hear in the moment, sincere or not. And their party is doing a slow reveal of random policies that are not lending themselves to easy fact-checking. They will privatize and cut the very services that we should be investing in, all for the benefit of those in sky-high tax brackets and their company shareholders. They have no meaningful plan directly addressed to you and me, and that's not likely to change. On June 7th, the stakes are high for our province's future. We need a sharp correction in Ontario that only the NDP can provide. Our plan outlines a great vision, all written out for you to see in clear and costed policies. The NDP is the only party that can be trusted to follow through on promises and govern without periods of high drama or deceptive politics. The NDP will provide the equalizing benefits that we all deserve: fair access to health services and day-to-day financial affordability. The NDP will focus on the protection and investment of our precious natural resources and provide an environment where businesses will thrive. I can't wait to begin working with you as your MPP and advocating hard for your priorities. Together on June 7th, we will make a change for the better in our riding and all of Ontario.
We're now finished with the formal portion of our evening. We've had some great food for thought from each candidate, and I know that our audience, both here and watching live through your TV, are better informed for the difficult choices that are before each of us as we go to the voting booth. Please remember to get out and vote on June 7th. If you need any help, please contact Elections Ontario or any of our local campaign offices. Thanks for your time and attention, and have a great night.